Hi, and welcome to Shadow Talk's weekly intelligence summary track, where our team of analysts dive into the top threat intelligence stories each week. To read their full findings and analysis, make sure to visit resources.digitalshadows.com. Now here's your host, Harrison Van Riper.
What's up, everybody? I'm Harrison Van Riper, and welcome back to another episode of Shadow Talk, the weekly intelligence summary podcast. With me this week, I have the Collier Jam, JC Cool, Jamie Collier. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Great to be back on.
Yep, I'm in London this week, so I got to see you briefly. Not as much as I would have liked to, but and then we also have Alex Giraku in Dallas. How are you doing, Alex?
Good. It's been a couple of weeks. We're all spread out now. Everyone's in a different place.
Yes, being spread out in a different place. That is usually how that happens. But I'll be back. Don't worry. I know you miss me dearly. I'll be back next week. All right. So in case you can tell, I have literally not prepared for this at all. So I need the info. So give me the info, Alex. What happened this week?
So as I'm sure you've heard, it made pretty big news over this past week. So the Norwegian company Norsk Hydro, it's a renewable energy and aluminum manufacturer. They suffered a cyber attack on the 19th of March. There was some reporting afterwards, once the news initially hit, that it had been ransomware. And what was interesting is that the company themselves, as well as the official Norwegian CERT, they didn't specify which variant it was. And so there was some speculation from security researchers about what type of ransomware actually hit them. And so the general consensus was that it was LockerGoga, which is a relatively new type of ransomware that we've only really seen in one other major incident, and that was against the French company Altran Technologies in January. So in essence, the ransomware had affected the company's smelters and plants across Norway, Brazil, the US, and Qatar. So the company had to resort to a few manual operations, making business a little bit slower than usual. And they instructed their employees not to connect to the company networks and disconnect everything to prevent the ransomware from spreading across the network. At that time, they weren't exactly sure what type of ransomware it was, so they wanted to take all precautions as necessary. So the company's website was inaccessible on Tuesday and throughout much of Wednesday, but on Wednesday, they were able to restore the majority of their operations. So they apparently didn't pay the ransom, and they had sufficient backups to be able to restore everything as much as they could. So right now what they're doing is they're investigating with the help of Europol and the full extent of what had actually happened, and as well as the financial impact of the attack.
Yeah, this has obviously been one of the bigger stories this week. So not a great situation, but it does sound like they had some backups in place and they had some good procedures. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so we've seen a couple of incidents over the past few months where you have examples of companies being hit by ransomware and then they make the ransom payment, which can be a lot. I think there was a recent example where it's about $400,000. It wasn't reported what the specific ransom demand was in this attack, but like I said, they had backups. They were very, very transparent. They held a press conference very quickly. And they were pretty open about their course of action and what they're looking to do. So that was a pretty refreshing to see, because you have all these horror stories about companies being completely devastated by ransomware and not being able to function at all, and it takes them a while to get back up and running.
Yeah, for sure. Do we have any additional info on the variant? Was it LockerGoga?
Yeah, so LockerGoga, it's been described as not being super sophisticated. And there's been a few similarities superficial to the Ryuk ransomware. People have noted that the language used in the ransom note is oddly similar to Ryuk, but that's not really enough to make any kind of firm links to the two. But it's just something that's interesting to note. So what's interesting about LockerGoga, there was some analysis done on a sample that was uploaded to VirusTotal on the same day. So the ransomware looks like it's spread via Active Directory. So once it's on a machine, the attackers can put it into the net logon folder. And then if they create a group policy object, making all other computers check the net logon when they start up, that'll execute the ransomware on the other machines. And since Active Directory is generally accepted by most firewalls, they can disguise that malicious activity as kind of normal Windows service traffic. And it was also interesting because since we don't know right now who was behind the attack, obviously it's a ransomware, so you think immediately, okay, are these people going to be financially motivated? There's actually some talk about kind of a destructive motivation of this attack instead. There have been reports on LockerGoga saying that it's capable of forcibly logging victims off their machines and preventing them from logging back in at all. So if they're not able to do that, how are they able to view or even meet the ransom demand? So that would kind of be counterproductive if it were purely financially motivated. But these are some of the questions that I suppose we'll have more answers to as these investigations continue over the next couple of days and weeks. So a trend that we've seen in the past couple of months are ransomware attacks targeting these smaller entities, so things like local governments. But this attack, as well as the one against Altran, which similarly used LockerGoga, are kind of still showing that ransomware attacks, if they're successful, they can still impact kind of a large global company. And there isn't a 100% trend to ransomware only being used against these small organizations. So even though these types of attacks don't happen on a daily basis or too often at all, they can still happen and they can still cause some damage if they're successful.
So yeah, if you want to go and download the full intelligence summary and read the full content, go to resources.digitalshadows.com and you can download the full intelligence summary there. So moving on, the other highlights from this week, Jamie.
Yeah, so a vulnerability in WinRAR was exploited. This is the application used to kind of create and view files in zip or RAR formats. And the vulnerability was 19 years old, so really shows you've got to pay attention to your history when it comes to cybersecurity sometimes. So since news of the vulnerability has kind of broke, it's been exploited quite prominently, delivered via both malware spam and phishing campaigns. So this campaign in particular was attributed to APTC 27 and used to target users in the Middle East. The group distributed Arabic language Lua documents in a compressed format, and then when that was uncompressed, it opened and extracted a backdoor. The group has previously conducted espionage operations within Syria, so they're kind of likely politically motivated. And as for the vulnerability, while it has been patched, the popularity of WinRAR means that it's likely that a lot of systems are still vulnerable for those that haven't updated. So I think it'd be interesting to track. I think it's likely that we'll see this continue to be exploited in the next few months.
Interesting. Not WinRAR. I love WinRAR. It's the
Is
best.
that because of all the illegal movies you've been downloading?
No, don't tell anybody about that, Jamie. We're public podcast right now. Don't you smile at me. All right, so moving on. Alex, what else is going on this week?
So we have some more activity from the threat actor agnostic players. So this time they've advertised a fourth batch of data sets for sale on the marketplace Dream Market. So this time the data is sourced from 6 different companies and contains over 26 million user records, ranging from 1 to 13 million each, including things like customer credentials, session data, IP addresses, and that sort of information. So this threat actor had reportedly breached 5 of these 6 companies in February 2019, suggesting that data is pretty fresh. And they were the ones that were responsible for putting 841 million records in February 2019 on Dream Market as well. So it's possible that more records will be put up for sale over the next few weeks or months because they seem pretty keen on giving media interviews. And they said that some companies had responded to their extortion demands. And so their data wasn't put on these listings. So it's likely that this isn't the full extent of the attacks that they've conducted. And so future listings are also pretty likely.
All right, cool. Well, Gnostic players still sticking around with their data breach offerings. So then, Jamie, final highlight of the week.
Yeah, so a threat actor has been capitalizing on the interest in the recent Boeing 737 crashes to deliver an Adwin Trojan and the Houdini H-worm remote access Trojan. So the emails are sent from a supposed intelligence analyst that claims to possess confidential documents related to the aircraft, and this is quite common in different contexts. We often see real world events abused by threat actors, and this can be kind of for financial gain often, typically capitalizing on media coverage, public interest in a story, to kind of try and trick targets into opening documents. So I think the message here is that for any listeners that like a good conspiracy theory, you can really kind of watch out because the emails are coming for you. Although I think we all know that Harrison is the conspiracy theory connoisseur, so I think, to be honest, he's the most liable to fall for this scam.
How did you know? How did you know my hobby? All right. Well, cool. That's interesting. So looking forward then, what are we expecting in the next few weeks?
So I think in a similar vein to the 737 aircraft scams, we're probably going to see threat actors try and capitalize on Cyclone Idai. Clearly a lot of concern in terms of what's going on there. And I think we're going to probably see scams, people being targeted. Threat actors are most likely to try and exploit the kind of altruistic nature of individuals that may be seeking to kind of make a donation for disaster relief. So providing fake donation pages, and that's, a pretty kind of safe way to raise funds.
All right, then Alex, we have one more forward look.
So following some political and societal pressure from the Christchurch mosque shooting in New Zealand, several Australian ISPs have started blocking access to websites that were hosting the live stream footage of the attack. So they've confirmed that the blocks are temporary, but considering some recent backlash faced by the social media company Facebook for hosting that kind of footage, it's likely there's going to be some arguments about internet freedom and censorship, which could possibly result in some ideologically motivated cyber activity as well.
Gotcha. All right. Well, then that wraps up the intelligence summary from this week. Now on to the question, which I literally have had. I did think of a question. I thought of a very good question. But listeners, be sure to go to iTunes, rate us on there, subscribe, whatever you listen to, whether it's Overcast or iTunes or wherever. Subscribe to the podcast. Go check out the website, resources.digitalshadows.com, where we publish our blogs and all that good stuff. All right, question of the week from Mr. Collier Jam. Where would be, so me and Alex are obviously both Americans, where would be somewhere you would recommend an American go in London that's not like touristy?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, jeez. Just laid it on you.
I would recommend Battersea Park, which is a poor man's central park. But it's a highly underrated and under-discussed park within London.
Okay.
And if you were feeling even more ambitious, you could go to Richmond Park, which is a bit further out, but it features a deer park, which I think for me is a real deal breaker.
It's a deal breaker.
I mean, what's a park without deer?
So if it doesn't
Harrison,
have deer, then you can't go.
Yeah, exactly.
Harrison, I recommend Holland Park as well.
Holland
It's a
Park?
bit smaller, but it has some nice architecture there.
Is that
They like a Japanese pond.
did Rick Holland form it?
No.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I used to go and play Pokemon Go there.
So next week, listeners, I will be back in Dallas. So then we'll give you another update. Thank you, guests. Thank you, listeners. Thank you. What was it? Holland Park and Richmond Park?
Yeah.
And what was the other one? Bath City?
Battersea.
Battersea. Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. Thank you, those parks. We'll talk to y'all next week.